Hey everyone, this is Shintai, host of the Anime Room, and here with me I have my friend Dom. How you doing, man?
I'm doing alright. Really tired, but I'm alright.
I wanted to do this discussion with you about Berserk because I feel that I put you in an interesting position with this because this was, for all intents and purposes, not counting like stuff that you saw as a kid, this was your first anime.
Yeah, as a kid, I watched Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z growing up, kind of passively, like whenever it was on after school. Over the years, I never really had that much of an interest in anime because I had that kind of narrow-minded view that a lot of people have, thinking that anime is just all weeb stuff, full of weird shit.
And this is a big reason why I wanted you to watch Berserk first, because I feel that Berserk breaks pretty much all of those misconceptions. And I think it worked pretty well because you've become such a huge fan, which I'm really happy about.
Yeah, and I have you to thank for that. I appreciate that.
No problem. I'm just happy to see more people get into Berserk. I'm the kind of person, and other people who know me know this, I like to do a sort of equivalent exchange sort of thing. I like to put my money where my mouth is, basically. So I would feel that it'd be unfair if I'm like, watch this fucking show, because I'm passionate about it. But then I decided to check out, based on your recommendation, the Winding Refn movies. Bronson, Only God Forgives, and Drive. Again, it's because I feel like if I'm really as passionate about this thing, I should show it and put the time in to check out something that you're passionate about as well, to be fair.
And that's cool.
And I got to see some good movies as a result. I don't mind the exchange at all. So, going back to Berserk, since it was your first anime, how was it compared to what you expected from this idea that you have of anime?
Usually when I watch something new, I kind of just clear my expectations or my own preconceptions of something before I watch it. Even I knew before going in, my view of anime was kind of narrow-minded to begin with. I had no expectations going in. I had no idea what the show was about. I watched the pilot episode, and even that kind of defied my expectations. I thought this was going to be like, okay, a show about a lone swordsman who takes on an oppressive evil king. But then he does it at the end of the first episode. And then the rest of the show is about how it got to that point, which I thought was actually more interesting. I thought, all right, I want to see where this goes.
Yeah, I really like that structure in Berserk, where you see things how they are now, and then you see how it got to that point. Another show that I really like that came after, called Gungrave, does pretty much the same thing. And that's another anime I want you to check out one of these days. I think you'll really enjoy that one.
Oh, cool.
Since I showed you the show, we've had several conversations about how deep the characters are, how complex the story is. I think that that's incredible. That just shows just how well written it is, that we've had multiple conversations just going into the psychology of the characters. There's just so much content, and it's only like 25 episodes, but in that 25 episodes, there was so much substance that we were able to mull over and discuss.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I adored about it. They were able to hand us these very fascinating group of characters with the little amount of episodes and even time they have, because each episode's only like 20 or so minutes.
Pretty much. Like, if you cut out the ending song and the opening song, then yeah, it's more like 20 minutes rather than a full 30.
Though I do kind of think they could have given a little more character depth to some of the other members of Band of the Hawk. They're likable characters, but they didn't really give much depth to even like Judo, Gaston, or Pippin. They were just really cool guys.
I can see that. I can agree with that. They're good characters, but yeah, they're not particularly deep. I think Judo, compared to the other Band of the Hawk, though, I think he had a little more depth to him, though, especially with his feelings towards Casca.
And the fact that he's not even being like a jealous guy about it, he was even encouraging Guts to pursue her. I was like, this is a cool guy. I like to know a guy like him.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really surprising thing about him. Yeah, you wouldn't expect that sort of thing. And it's actually pretty interesting because in an interview, Kentaro Miura admitted that the Band of the Hawk were based on his college friends.
Oh, so basically Judo was like his Neil Patrick Harris friend or something?
Yeah, basically, yeah. A lot of people really hate the ending of Berserk because it does lack that sense of finality. How do you feel about that?
I think I know why it was ended like that, because I think they might have hoped to make a second season, but it didn't happen, so they decided to end it on how a lot of TV shows end, some kind of really intense cliffhanger. Something where they could continue and make another season, but Since they removed a lot of elements that were important from the manga, I think they kind of wrote themselves into a corner and probably couldn't do a second season anyway, since the Skull Knight is nowhere even mentioned or implied.
Yeah, definitely. Cutting out Puck, the little fairy from the manga, that wasn't too big of a deal. His character could have been introduced in the second season easily, I think. But cutting out the Skull Knight was definitely a problem. And I think that did pretty much write themselves into a corner. And it's definitely a shame he wasn't in it, because I would have liked to have seen just how they would have drawn him, because his design is so amazing. But the ending, I think, is also effective in a way, because a lot of anime is based on some sort of manga or like a series of books, or sometimes even like a visual novel. A lot of the times anime are like glorified trailers for the source material. It doesn't always work. I've seen like tons of anime, and there's only been a few where I actually felt like I wanted to go back to the source material. And Berserk for me was like one of the few. And it was the same for you. You actually went out and bought copies of the manga, right?
Yeah, volume 1. It kind of went the same way as the pilot did. There was the introduction of Puck, which was not in the anime. It was kind of interesting to see Guts the way he is now, or in the Black Swordsman arc. His personality is just radically different, and that wasn't even really portrayed in the anime. In the anime, he was just mostly silent. In the pilot, to kind of see this almost dehumanized Guts is kind of interesting. I mean, he doesn't even give a shit if the Snake Baron destroys this city. He just wants to kill him. That's it.
And I think looking at his actions compared to what happened right beforehand, I think it does make sense.
Yeah, I think if you went through what he did, you'd probably lose a lot of your humanity.
I think if you were to read the manga first and you saw Guts in like the first 3 volumes how he is, you might be like, well, why is Guts like this? And what's wrong with him? Like, why is he this desensitized person? It is hinted that he did go through something, but it isn't until the Golden Age arc where things are fully explained, which is what the majority of the anime is an adaptation of. And I feel that the Golden Age arc is one of the best written things. It's incredible.
Even watching the anime, I thought this is probably among some of the best fantasy fiction I've ever encountered. This is among like the class of stuff, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones.
I've seen some people, like I've never read or watched Game of Thrones, and some people were saying that they were comparing the eclipse to the Red Wedding. I don't know what that is.
I'm not sure either. I've only really watched the first few episodes of Game of Thrones because my stepfather has the first season. I'm not sure yet. I'd have to...
One of the things I feel that Berserk does really well is set up its supernatural element, because you have that first episode, you have that pilot episode where it seems like demons are commonplace. And then we go into the flashback where demons aren't commonplace, really rare thing that most people aren't aware of. But it is something that's present. As the show goes on, especially with the foreshadowing of the Beylit, it slowly reintroduces that element back. And then the eclipse happens, which is the culmination of all of that foreshadowing. I really liked how that was done, because it's stuff that you don't really notice too much the first time around. But then after the eclipse happens, I felt as I was reflecting back on what happened on the events of the show, it made sense. And I was like, wow, okay, it was leading up to not necessarily exactly what happened in the eclipse, but if you did look back, you're like, wow, okay, it has been leading up to something big happening.
That's what I kind of liked about Berserk. It didn't go completely crazy with its supernatural elements early on. It didn't blow its wad early. It kind of just slowly built up, and then they introduced Nosferatu, Zod, and then they kind of took a break from the supernatural stuff, and then Zod showed up again for a cameo, and then kept low again, and then, well, the eclipse happens. That actually made it more impactful. If they actually blown their wad early on, the eclipse would probably not have as much impact as it did.
I would agree with that. I think leaving it at the very end was perfect. And then they dedicated 2 full episodes, basically, really drove home how traumatizing and fucked up it was.
Yeah, it was. I had a lot of mixed emotions watching that, just anger, a bit of sorrow in there, and just complete another shock.
I remember when you first watching the show, you thought that Griffith was a sociopath. and then you thought that initial impression was wrong. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
That was more just kind of a reaction to his actions and just kind of some of his general behavior in the series. Like, he probably learns that Guts accidentally killed, is it Lord Julian? I forget his name. He killed his son, and then Griffiths he doesn't even like scold Guts or talk to him about it. He's just completely calm. I'm like, okay, this isn't normal. Then I thought, him being a sociopath doesn't make sense because he has genuine feelings for some people, and a sociopath does not. He genuinely loves Guts.
Yes, he does.
A sociopath is incapable of love, so that doesn't make sense. Maybe he has some narcissistic qualities, but not necessarily a sociopath.
I'd say he's the vain person to a certain extent because the assassination that he had Guts do. I think a big reason why he wanted Guts specifically to do it is because Guts is the only person he feels comfortable exposing his darker side to. Someone like Judo, in terms of his skill set, would have been more appropriate for the mission. However, he didn't feel comfortable talking to Judo about it and having Judo do the mission because he didn't feel that he could show that side of himself to Judo. But Guts is different. Guts is not a judgmental person, and he actually cares about Guts' opinion, unlike pretty much anyone else in the show. In that conversation where he's talking to Guts about doing the assassination, he was asking him, like, will you do this for me? And even Guts was, like, taken aback by that. He's like, why don't you just order me to do it like you always do? Which I thought was a very important moment. I would say the three most important, most fleshed out, developed characters would be Guts, Griffith, and Casca. And I think Casca's role in the story changed as it went on.
Yeah, she started as the very jealous and bitter towards Guts because of Griffith's special attention towards Guts, which he never expressed to Casca or anyone else. And then she softened after confessing to Guts about it. And then, well, romance soon after.
I'm not huge into romances, but the romance between Guts and Casca I thought was handled pretty well because they weren't like overly lovey-dovey and shit like that. I thought it was a pretty interesting romance in the way it was handled.
Because I had seen a lot of other anime, I thought, okay, I wonder how they're going to handle this romance. And they're actually, I was surprised they're actually pretty subdued about it, like overly loving. They're just kind of normal.
I would say a lot of the relationships that the characters have are fairly realistic and they feel normal, except for like with Griffith, because I feel like normally when you have a relationship with someone you can place some sort of label on it, like, oh, those two are friends, those two are lovers, those two are family, those two are companions, co-workers. And I don't feel that there is a singular label that you can put on the relationship between Griffith and Guts.
I thought of many different things when watching the show. It was like kinsmanship. He sees him as like a brother. He loves him in a romantic sense. I always kind of wondered going through the show, like, what exactly does he feel for Guts?
It's a complex relationship. I really don't think there is one word that defines their relationship together. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, but in present day, in the manga, it's now just mortal enemies.
Yes, things have certainly changed for them. I've heard a lot of people say Griffith is this great villain, and he's like one of the best villains ever. And I can see that, but my problem with that is not to say he's a bad villain, but simply that for the majority of the Golden Age arc, he really isn't the villain at all. He's not even the antagonist. He only becomes that towards the end. So how do you feel about that?
I never thought of him as like a villainous character, for even during the times where I thought he was like he was kind of a sociopath. I thought maybe an anti-hero more like, because he was willing to do even some questionable things to get his place as king, even like, assassinate figures that may be in his way. You could argue what he did for the Lord and the Queen were self-defense, but you could tell he had a more different motivation in mind when killing them.
I mean, he didn't give a fuck at all about killing the Queen of Midland. Like, shit.
I mean, to be fair, she was one of the masterminds behind the supposed poisoning.
She was, and he didn't realize that she was one of them, but he didn't care. And he was just like, well, you're in my way, so fuck you.
Oh, really? Yeah, I actually thought he knew.
I distinctly remember him saying that he didn't realize that the Queen was in on it. He just knew that there was a plot against him.
He even gave that little monologue to the Queen as she was about to burn to death, saying, "In war, there's no such thing as class or things like that. It doesn't matter who you are. You're basically expendable on a battlefield, no matter who you are."
There definitely seemed like there was this division in the show regarding royalty and peasantry. And the royalty was so stuck in their traditions and stuck in their ways and refusing to conform to what the king was like, hey, this mercenary group, they're doing a good fucking job, so let's prop them up. And pretty much the rest of royalty was just like, fuck no.
Yeah, because they're just normal peasants instead of where everyone is related to each other in the fucking royal family.
And I thought that was handled pretty well. I mean, it was simple, but it was effective in just getting the audience to be like, man, fuck these people.
Yeah, they're not sympathetic in any way. They're fucking jealous monsters.
If anything, the series downplayed that aspect of them because there's stuff in the manga that portrays them like even worse. Particularly the guy that Guts murdered, the guy that he assassinated. There was another dynamic to his character that was completely written out in both the series and the films.
Well, that was kind of interesting before he kills that guy. He saw the Lord training his son how to fight with a sword and being very, very hard on him. And I think Guts probably saw a lot in that kid because probably the Lord now reminds him of Gambino at that point. And probably when he killed him, that actually made it even worse. It wasn't just killing the kid. He actually killed someone he actually saw a lot in, which made it even more tragic. I kind of wonder in the manga if that will be brought up again, that will actually play into the later volumes. I always kind of wondered, are they just going to kind of keep this secret the entire series? I wonder what they're going to do with this. That seems like something that would be very significant to Guts' really personality or his character.
I don't remember it being brought up again, and I don't really think it was too overly significant for his character because you also have to remember Guts has killed a lot of people even before then. Death is normal for him, so I think he was just shocked that it was a kid, but at the same time, in Guts' mind, this is another person that he's killed.
There are no heroes in Berserk.
No, definitely not.
I mean, hell, the Band of Hawk are mercenaries, and traditionally mercenaries sometimes do some questionable, even objectively evil shit.
I don't recall anything at the moment that the Band of the Hawk did specifically that was that bad, but they are still a mercenary group. They just do their job.
They'll work for who has the most money. They would probably work for the Kingdom of Dolgery if they offer them enough money, but I guess Midland was offering them more.
Pretty much. I mean, if it wasn't for that, yeah, they could have easily been on the side of Dolgery. Honestly, what would have really mattered to them?
Griffith had a personal problem with the King of Dolgery because they previously had a relationship at one point, so I think Griffith would not be comfortable with working with him again, so maybe there might be something personal to it as well.
That's a good point. Actually, what did you think of that plot twist when Guts and Casca were talking in the cave and she was revealing her backstory along with Griffith's?
That was just kind of showing Griffith's character that he was willing to do anything to get what he wants, even if it was to soil himself, basically. I think that was actually very important in the show that he was particularly not happy about it to the point he was harming himself, but he knew it had to be done and he had to get what he needed, which was basically, I think it was supplies for the Hawks.
Yeah, it was. And I think a lot of people have this misconception that Griffith doesn't care about anything and that he isn't affected by anything. But I think that scene in particular shows that that simply isn't true. If he really didn't care, if he really wasn't affected by it, he wouldn't have been clawing his arms and bleeding.
He slept with a pedophile. He would not be happy about that.
He was willing to do it because it would have furthered his own ambitions, but it's not something that he was doing gladly.
Yeah, and I think it was just kind of show that Griffith knew that he wouldn't like it, but he knew it would have to be done. But whatever dirty deed he would probably have to do to further his dream.
I also find that the relationship between Guts and Griffith is very subtle, one of the strongest points. because there's a lot of theories concerning the two of them, and I think a lot of them are valid. The way I see it is that when Griffith first sees Guts, he's impressed by his skill. I think around right when he first saw him and he saw how strong he was, despite how young he was, the gears started turning in his head of, oh, this is someone that if I can have in the Band of the Hawk, he might be able to stick around. Because for all intents and purposes, if you're a mercenary for the Band of the Hawk, you have a time limit. Because even though the Band of the Hawk as a group was strong, the individuals were still like normal people. They were strong as a group because of Griffith's leadership, but they were still comprised of normal people. And he sees Guts, who is clearly up and beyond, head and shoulders above your average person. Griffith sees someone like Guts and thinks, this is someone that's going to stick around. This is someone I might be able to put my trust in. This is someone that I might be able to confide in, because this is someone that probably won't leave.
Who's wrong about that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why Griffith gets so attached to Guts. Casca herself said it. Griffith never approached anyone to join the Band of the Hawk. Everyone was attracted to him because of his charisma, because of his present aura, except for Guts.
Guts is really the only one who thought that it might have been bullshit. Guts found out later, no, that wasn't the case.
I think Guts was the only person that treated Griffith as an equal. Everyone else put Griffith on a pedestal, but Guts was the only person that didn't do that.
There's a lot of instances where you can tell when they're injured and they're in their battle with Nosferatu, Zod, he completely just defies everyone saying, wait for him to finish his meeting. I'm gonna go see my friend. Of course, that pisses Casca off and he gets punched in the face.
Yeah.
Actually, at that point, I was actually kind of on Casca's side about that. I was like, dude, let the guy do his business. You can talk to him later.
Casca is more justified than we give her credit for. We just kind of get angry at her. It's just like, yo, fuck you, Casca. You're just a bitch. But if you actually like look at her actions objectively, she makes some good points.
She has some very reasonable observations about Guts' behavior, him being reckless, defying orders, even though Griffith's completely okay with that. It's pretty much justified, but admittedly, she was probably maybe a little bit too harsh. I mean, it was more just combined with her overall hatred of him and jealousy.
She was jealous because, again, Griffith was treating Guts differently.
I think anyone would feel that way. If you've known this person for a long time and then they just meet this person who they've only known for maybe only a few weeks, they start treating him like someone special. That would seem very odd to anyone.
After they met, there was I think it was like 2-3 years. There was a time skip. I'm sure like during that time, the relationship would have, I guess, blossomed in a way. Like Griffith and Guts would have gotten closer.
And Guts got buffer. I was like, damn, his appearance significantly changed. In the second and third episode, he looked more like a spiky-haired version of the protagonist from Yu Yu Hakusho.
But going back to the equality thing for a bit, the moment where Guts heard that speech from Griffith and Griffith didn't realize that Guts and Casca were listening, the way that was handled was great. And it was something that I felt that the movie mishandled. Guts was at the bottom of the stairs. Griffith was at the very top. And then the show made it a point to have that still frame of Griffith finishing his speech about how the man that is to be his friend is his equal. And Guts being at the bottom, and I felt that was very strong symbolism of how they aren't equal, at least maybe in Guts' eyes, maybe in Griffith's eyes. Maybe Griffith was just putting on airs and just talking shit to impress the princess. Maybe he did feel that way. Either way, the symbolism was very clear. They were not on equal footing.
No, they weren't, and I thought that was definitely one of the most significant moments in the show, and I thought, this is definitely going to be the thing that causes their downfall. In a lot of fiction, usually there's some kind of guy listens in on a conversation concerning him where he feels put down or devalued. That kind of results in him leaving or quitting in some way. And I thought it was handled very well in Berserk. It was reminiscent of that interesting little trope.
I just find it so ironic, though, because the moment when Guts leaves the Band of the Hawk, he does so with the intent of finding a way to strengthen their friendship. And Griffith saw it as a betrayal.
That was one of the times that maybe made me think maybe his speech was bullshit. Maybe Guts was not meant to hear that. Maybe he didn't mean a word of it. I mean, if he did mean a word of it, then Griffith is a hypocrite. I actually forgot at that point in the show that Griffith actually once said to Guts that he belonged to him. I actually forgotten that, and it's possible I think maybe Guts did too. And I thought, damn, dude, now you're being a control freak.
That was actually a scene that was cut out from the movies. I didn't like that they cut that part out, because I did feel that that was an important line.
There was a lot of things cut out in the film that I was not particularly a fan of, and that's particularly why I only really liked the third Berserk film.
Yeah, because the third Berserk film does give more of a sense of finality, and you get to see, like, okay, this is how he escaped from the eclipse, this is what happened to Casca. It does set up for, like, okay, there's gonna be more.
The third film isn't perfect either. I think the eclipse is less creepier as it was in the anime, because I think the anime just had the right color palette. I mean, yeah, the animation wasn't great because it was a low-budget show, but it still looked fantastic.
Yes, the art in the Berserk series is great. It's just the animation that sucks.
Another thing in the Berserk film they got wrong, the rape scene of Casca felt more erotic, and I don't think that's what they were meaning to go for.
No. No.
But however, it felt like very erotic in terms of its portrayal. The music choice was horrendous.
It was so bad. I just didn't understand. The music overall is inferior to the series, but it was at least decent. But for that moment, the song choice was just terrible.
I think it should have just been dead silence, because I have seen like rape scenes in other films where it was just completely silent. There was no music. That would actually hammer it further. It would just been this feeling of empty hopelessness that Guts was feeling because he couldn't save Casca from Griffith.
Actually, that reminds me. So, I don't know about you, but as I was watching the show, I remember very distinctly in the first episode that Guts lost an arm and he didn't have one of his eyes. And throughout the entire show, I was thinking, like, when is this going to happen? When is he going to lose his eye? When is he going to lose his arm? And I never thought that both events would have occurred at the same fucking time, basically, in the eclipse.
I was actually surprised by that. Actually, I had forgotten the first episode, probably because it had been a long time since I watched the first episode at that point, that he was missing an arm and an eye. So I thought, oh, right, alright, so that's what happened. That's it. God, it's so fucked up. He gets his arm eaten and he has to cut it off.
It's so brutal.
And then he gets his eye gouged out.
The mental fortitude one must have to cut off their own arm is fucking insane.
Any normal man would have fainted from shock or died from blood loss immediately, but Guts is no ordinary man. He's just so pumped with adrenaline from the current situation to what he's been going through the past couple, I don't know how long you're in the eclipse, maybe a couple hours. I mean, damn, dude, his adrenaline must have been so high that cutting his arm off must have been equivalent to cutting his finger on a piece of glass.
He just didn't give a fuck, and Casca was more important. In the end, it kind of didn't matter, which is even more fucked up.
Yeah, it was actually that moment where that pretty much solidified Guts' place among one of my favorite characters in fiction. If you are brave enough to cut off your own arm to save someone you love, I salute you. You're permanently best husbando.
I consider Guts to be a true badass. And that's a word that I see flung around, and I see people misuse it all the time. No, Guts is a badass. Through and through. I don't see how anyone could disagree with that.
We have some theories about, well, we do know what Nosferatu Zod is. He pretty much is, in a way, an agent of fate. Like, when he's about to kill either Guts or Griffith, he noses the Beywood around Griffith's neck, and he's like, I see how it is. This guy is destined to become the next member of the Godhead. Then he's like, peace, and he goes through the ceiling. And then Nosferatu Zod shows up again during the battle between Midland and Doldry and sees Guts has broken his sword. And he sees this and throws Guts his sword. And there's a couple of theories surrounding why he did that. One is he sees Guts as a equal opponent because he was actually the very first man to ever injure him. And he probably respects him as a fighter. And then the other theory is that he did that because he knows that Guts is part of the prophecy, basically.
The sacrifice.
Yeah, he would cause Griffith's downfall, and the sacrifice would happen. Then I thought, those two theories could coexist as well. He sees it as something that has to be done, but he also sees Guts as a respectable opponent. Pretty much in the case of like free will versus fate, Guts is definitely free will and his complete defiance of the God Hand and his fate. And also the Skull Knight is definitely an agent of free will as well.
I do find it ironic, though, that despite that, if it wasn't for Guts, the eclipse wouldn't have happened.
It's ironic. He's both an instrument of fate, and he's also a warrior of free will.
I love how that's kind of intertwined.
Yeah, that's what I was fascinated by. They managed to make this character two different things within its own themes. That's interesting.
Without Guts, Griffith's fate wouldn't have been able to come to fruition. But at the same time, Guts is fighting against said fate.
It's kind of interesting how the God Hand basically went after Griffith in his weakest state, and they knew he couldn't say no at that point. If Griffith was how he normally is, just a healthy, fit warrior, he basically probably would have told the God Hand to go fuck themselves.
Yeah, he probably would have found some way to try and fight back.
Yeah, but they took him at his weakest moments, which was interesting, and there's also a lot of theories of, like, some people thought that what Griffith did, despite how horrible it was actually in a way human. If you were in your weakest state and you were promised ultimate power, what would you do? It's still horrendously wrong and irredeemable, but makes you wonder, like, would you have done it?
If you were in the same situation, ultimate power in exchange for the lives of everyone close to you, what would you do? I would feel like Griffith, in that instance, while still contemptible for what he did, you can't say it wasn't understandable.
Yeah, well, to be fair, evil is understandable. Insanity isn't.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
What Griffith did was sane and understandable, but Jesus, it was irredeemable in every sense, and I hope he gets his comeuppance at the end of the series.
What's even worse, though, is it wasn't just enough to kill everyone. It's like, oh, Guts, I'm gonna rape Casca in your face. Right in front of you.
Yeah, that was like the icing on the contempt cake. I was like, you are irredeemable, and I hope you fucking die.
I have a friend who says that Griffith didn't truly become the villain until he started raping Casca.
Yeah, I could see that. I can understand what the hell he was doing there, but that was just unnecessary as all hell.
That was just, I am doing this in spite of you.
Yeah, that's all kinds of evil.
You can at the very least say, like, yes, killing the Band of the Hawk for ultimate power is fucked up, but you can at least say you can understand that and be like, you might be able to put yourself in his shoes, and understand the decision. But this was just, no, this is not understandable. This is just him just being a piece of shit.
Yeah, I was like, oh, dear God. So I was like pretty much watching the series and that moment was going to happen. I wasn't expecting it. I was literally going, no, please, no, and no. Okay, you are fucking shit at this point. I really hope Guts does win in the manga series. I really hope there is a victory.
I think there will be. I think it will probably be a bittersweet ending. I'm sure it won't all be like hunky-dory. But I think he will win just because I feel that that's the message of Berserk. Free will overcome determinism, fate.
Yeah, definitely. Some people do have theories that Berserk might end on a downer, bittersweet ending because one of the subgenres of Berserk is horror. And horror traditionally has either a bittersweet or downer ending. So there's definitely that theory out there.
Yeah, but I think Miura has proven that he doesn't give a fuck about doing things traditionally.
No, he doesn't. And I like that about him.
I think I remember in an interview he said that part of the inspiration for Berserk is just watching the news and incorporating real-life events into the story. Not necessarily like lifting the events and putting it in the story, but just incorporating elements of real life into Berserk, which I think is very interesting.
It's kind of unusual, I think, when writing a fantasy story.
It is, but at the same time, I think it's part of what gives Berserk that sense of realism, that sense of grit.
Just hopefully, when he's watching the news today, he doesn't try to add an Ebola subplot into any future volumes.
There's this other country of America, and they're suffering from some disease, oh no. So my final question is, has Berserk got you interested in anime, and has it successfully broken your misconception?
Of course. Since then, I've recently been checking out other anime series, like I recently got into Death Note, which I need to get back into. I still need to watch Fate Zero, which you've been getting on my ass about.
Hey, I watched those Hannibal movies, so you would watch Fate Zero.
Yeah. And I do have other interests in other anime like out there. Like I do have an interest in watching Cowboy Bebop.
That is an excellent show. That one, unlike the other ones I've recommended, is episodic with an overarching story.
You mentioned Black Lagoon a lot, so I have an interest in that.
Oh yeah, Black Lagoon is fucking awesome. Black Lagoon is similar to Bebop in a way, except it's contemporary and it's more over the top.
And another anime I have an interest in seeing that you haven't seen yet is Monster.
I actually just finished putting Monster on my flash drive. I'm going to start watching that soon.
So yeah, definitely this show has definitely broken the mold of my misconceptions of the art form in general. I mean, really the misconception I had kind of just faded over the years, but it was kind of always still there, so I've always had hesitation to watch anything. But Berserk has definitely broken that, and I appreciate you springing it on me.
I'm just happy to hear that, man. Because the way I see it, a good story is a good story. It doesn't matter how it's presented. If it's a live action, if it's CG, if it's animated, what matters is the story. And anime is just another way of presenting the story.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised it took this to break the mold. I thought after watching Go-Go 13, The Professional, I would have thought, damn, I guess anime isn't all like how I thought it was.
I do have a few other, like real quick, before we end this off, I have a few other animes just so you can have a few more options. There was one anime movie I mentioned called Perfect Blue, and that is one that I highly recommend. That one is a fucking masterpiece in my eyes. I also highly recommend an anime called Samurai X Trust and Betrayal. That one's pretty short. It's only like 3 or 4 episodes, but it's beautiful. I think it's amazing. Of course, I've mentioned Gungrave. I think Gungrave is something that's definitely up your alley, especially since you like Berserk and it has a lot of similarities. I think I'll leave it like that for now because I still also want you to watch Fate Zero. Thanks for coming on, man. Great talking to you about Berserk. It's always good to talk about. It's even better that this was what your introduction to anime was and that it has inspired you to want to check out more anime. That makes me really happy because I think that there's a lot of great stuff just waiting to be checked out, and I'm sure that you'll be happy with some of the other shows I recommend, and probably some other people recommend as well. It's good to have you, man. It was good talking to you.
It was my pleasure, man. Thanks for offering me this chance to do this video.
No problem, man.
Good talking to you. Peace out, dude.
This has been Shintai and Dom. Take care, everyone.